you very much that I can be here on this forum and I could participate yesterday in the discussions and listen to the different lectures, which were very interesting and impressive. My subject is between transgender and transhuman, a new totalitarian threat for civilization. The Western society is in the grip of pseudo-religious cult or sect, which could be defined as a wokeism. In historical terms, wokeism is the successor of earlier communism or other forms of Western utopianism. As any other radical ideology, wokeism has many faces and many forms. One thing is pretty sure. What started in the 1960s as a small group of radicals and the leftist extremists has since ballooned into a tremendous political force in the Western society, fully controlled by the USA. On one hand, this ideology preaches a new religion of sex, gender, and sexuality. On the other, it promises a creating of totally new human being, so-called the transhuman man. Let me first make some key points. Why do I see a clear link and visible connection between transgender ideology and the transhuman project? To understand it, I have to describe each particular form of radical ideology. Secondly, I try to explain why these new ideologies must, exactly as their communist predecessor, create the totalitarian forms of political government. I will show why the wokeism and its other manifestations, I mean transgenderism and transhumanism, must be totalitarian. I hope to prove that there is a clear affinity between the old communist ideology and the new transgender or transhuman one. They have one common enemy, the reality, the normalcy, or in more sociological terms, the family, the nation state, and surely the traditional religion. First of all, both ideologies try to abolish the notion of human nature and refuse to accept the objective moral order. In that respect, the proponents of both movements want to achieve a common purpose, which is creating a completely new human being. To do that, they have to previously damage the old, classical Western civilization. How could it be differently? Both the proponents of the new queer society and the supporters of transhumanity agree that the present human being must be overcome. Both ideologies try to replace God as the creator. So, which is the relation between the gender ideology and the transhuman one? I would say that the transgender movement seems to be the testing ground for the creation of new transhuman society. Why? Because the supporters of transgender ideology, which is strictly linked to the earlier radical revolutionary movements like communism or feminism, are going to produce a thoroughly new human being. The new human being will be totally liberated from the nature, the biological sex, the cultural or religious constraints. I'm using interchangeably some terms: genderism, transgenderism, queer theory. All of them describe the same sexual revolution, the same process of emancipation or of liberation, pointing to some particular aspects. Some of the radicals clearly describe this project. According to Shulamit Firestone, a famous guru of the left, the main aim of the new radicalism is the overthrow of the oldest, most rigid class case system in existence, the class system based on sex, a system consolidated over thousands of years, lending the archetypal male and female roles and undeserved legitimacy and simic permanence. And she goes even further, that is the quotation. The end goal of feminist revolution must be not just the elimination of male privilege, but of the sex distinction itself. Genital differences between human beings would no matter culturally. So it means the end of family, the end of the social roles, and so on. The biology has nothing to do with the culture, according to them. You are what you think you are, and the biological sex is not important anymore. All the proponents of LGBT movement are perfectly aware that the gender ideology must damage present society. It is a necessary effect of the idea that gender is, as Judith Butler, another guru of the left, proposed, something liquid and fluid. There is no division, they maintain, between natural and perverse form of sexuality. All forms of satisfaction are equally good and equally moral. According to them, homosexual activity is as natural as the natural familial relations between men and women. Consequently, everybody can decide who or what he, she, they is. So how one can explain the reality? How it is possible that most people, both men and women, behave as if they had stable nature, as if they were the ones they seem to be? There is one reply, according to ideologists. We are all victims of false consciousness, of fake awareness. We are used to be the men and women. Actually, everybody who thinks that there are natural laws, rules, and obligations is a victim of political and ideological violence in the past. The past as such is cursed. There was no glorious past of the Western Christian culture, not at all. According to them, the past was evil, unjust, and tyrannical. So it doesn't matter that the average person doesn't see the general injustice. He, she is the victim of evil social structures. He, she is under the power of stronger ones. Because of that, queer activists train people to be vulnerable. They are teaching them to look for oppression in everything. Who is then really responsible for the lack of happiness, for oppression and discrimination? The ones who impose on society the idea of normalcy. The powerful, white, heterosexual men. Let's mention some of these ideas which by the gender or queer activists are perceived as the most dangerous. The idea that there are only two sexes, two biological sexes, male and female, and a person's sex is observed at birth, not assigned. The idea that there are men and women. The idea that a basic family consists of father and mother and children. The idea that marriage is accessible only for opposite sexes. I mean that only the man and the woman can be a real marriage. The idea that only women can be mothers and only men could be fathers. The idea that there is a continuity between different generations. The idea of patriotism as loyalty to ethnic and cultural community. All this is normal and natural, and because of that must be abolished. It is the normal society and traditional nation which is to blame for radical oppression. The victory of this approach would be a kind of testing ground for the future, for the total upheaval. If it is possible to convince people that experiments with gender are acceptable, that it is morally good to damage biological nature of men, one can hope for even further interference in human nature. Even further, it means creating a new transhuman man. Gender ideology seems to be the first step on the road to create a new transhuman human being. It is exactly the point which Mr. Yuval Noah Harari, another guru of the left, a very influential supporter of this transhumanism idea, propagates. According to him, we are closer to the end of history, that is, we are closer to the coalescence of man and technology. And he said, I think the reason the debates about transgender people, not binary people, and everything else are so fiery is that people may have a subconscious feeling that the debates of the future will be about what we can do with the human body and brain. How can we redesign them? How can we modify them? The first practical reality that we have encountered with these questions is gender. We can say that people are intolerant and very touchy when it comes to sex and gender. But I think that are the words of Harari. But I think, in fact, you know subconsciously that this is the first debate on transhumanism. So the link between the transgender and transhumanism and transhuman seems to be explicit. If it is possible to abolish and to deconstruct gender and sex, then it would be possible to overcome the idea of human nature as such. If you can experiment with gender, then you can go even further and change human brain and human body. But how to reach the future transhuman society? There is only one way: to take control over the present children. Present children must become the first transhuman humans of the future. It is the reason for which gender and queer activists want to conquer schools and kindergarten. To some extent, all of them belong to the school of Freud. They don't believe in any kind of childish innocence. On the contrary, they think that from the earliest moments of human life, children are looking for sexual satisfaction, struggling against traditional cultural barriers created by the church, society, the state, the adults. According to gender ideology or queer theory, there is no motherhood and no fatherhood as positive, unchangeable value, which society should respect. Queer activists are known for saying, if your parents aren't accepting your identity, I'm your mom now. For them, the only way to prove that parents love their children is to accept, affirm, and celebrate their child's transition. So, to be a good mother or father means for them to stop being the father or mother at all. Instead of teaching children some positive patterns, how to be a good boy or a good girl, parents should accept the selfish, radical, and alien choice of their children. Why are children so important for the future world? Because it is much easier to manipulate them. So the new society must create, in that respect, educate new forms of human beings without the links with the past. The past culture, the past civilization must be overruled as the system of patriarchat or transphobia or homophobia. The old system of God, of the Bible, must be replaced by the anti-system of men. The second part of my presentation would be focused on the problem of totalitarianism. Actually, both these ideologies must cause total relativization of the value of human life and cause the abolishing of the dignity of human person. To create a new human being that will be totally without its own nature and without own historical, cultural, and religious identity, one has to have an unlimited power. That is the reason why the supporters of LGBT movement fight for unrestrained political power, which means the end of freedom of speech and control over the educational system. As one American expert has shown, the practice of queer theory is called queering. The word queer, in this sense, is a verb. To queer somebody, to queer, is to destabilize the social, cultural, and political normalizing structures that work to solidify identities, and in doing so, skew power toward the norm. So how to do it? Taking over the political power. Firstly, the activists must destabilize the society. That is the reason that they must publicly attack all symbols of social or national normalcy. First of all, they are focused on attacking the religious symbols. Blasphemy and profanation is the means to show that there is nothing holy, nothing natural and inviolable. Then there are the national or traditional heroes, their statues or monuments. The gender activists are not just barbarians. They are, first of all, revolutionaries. They want to shake, they want to shock, because that is the necessary first step to win the full power. That is the way to wake up people. That is the way to show them the world in which you live is false. Everybody is oppressed. The society as such is oppressive. Just look around. Just wake up and see the general injustice. It is not just that you are a man or a woman. The normalcy as such is unfair. The reality as such is unjust. So attacking the symbols of normalcy, they try to tell people, wake up. But it is not enough. They don't want just to shock, but to take over the power, controlling the key political positions in the government, the media, and financial system. They can carry out the great idea of gender-fluent queer society. But they are not interested in normal governing. As I mentioned a few times, they are radicals. They believe in the abolishing of human nature. So their power must be revolutionary. They are not going to respect any unchangeable human rights and freedoms. They don't believe they exist. They know, or at least they think they know, that all these old liberal values are just illusion. So the activists try to get rid of them. According to their new doctrine, there is no freedom of speech as such. You can have freedom of speech as far as you don't discriminate. You are free to speak whatever you want to, but you cannot offend the sexual minorities. If you judge, you offend and discriminate. So actually, you are not entitled to call homosexual a sin or the transgender is mutilation. If you try to be normal, you oppress. It is a logical consequence of this craziness. If normalcy is oppressive, the ones who try to keep it are the real oppressors. And the new gender-conscious government should get rid of them. It would be the only real justice, to make silent people thinking otherwise. The normalcy is hate, and because of that, the new queer gender government should introduce the new law against hate speech, destroying the possibility of resistance. The enemies of justice have no rights. It is easy to predict that in that respect, there is no difference between queer or gender and communist ideology. All of them must be totalitarian. Only the truly totalitarian power makes people ready to abandon their inalienable rights and freedoms. Only the truly totalitarian power makes people forget their history, their inheritance, their past. Only the fully total state is able to damage the human nature, to get rid of family, of the nation, of the tradition, of the national pride. To reach the new transgender society means to damage the nation state and its identity, which was based on some immovable principles. Traditionally, we believed that each nation has its own purpose, its own character. What is more, we believed that the individual member of the nation has also some unconditional, inalienable duties in reference to the nation and to his fatherland. But for the gender ideology, we are just individual beings focused on the satisfaction of one's desire, which is liquid and not subjected to reason. Because of that, the LGBT activists want to eliminate the idea of the transcendent Christian God or the man with his immortal soul created in the image of God. The new human being would be actually a new kind of the animal, which will be able to satisfy itself in any accessible way. To reach the happiness, the man would stop being the man, the women would resign to be women, and human beings would stop being human beings. All of them will be used for the utopian purpose for creating both a natural and new transgender and transhuman society, which wouldn't know the injustice and oppression of the past. It would be a truly satanic society created against the Christian God. Thank you very much.